What's going on, everybody? Welcome to episode 7 of the Hoop Venue podcast. My name is Tyler, and as always, I'm joined by Sean today. Sean, how we feeling?
We're feeling all right. Really excited for episode 7. Already at 7 episodes. Yeah, super excited to dive in here today.
Yeah, man, we're coming off a pretty interesting slate of games from last night. The Cavs absolutely blitzed the Warriors, going up 41 at the half to improve to 10-0. But really, that wasn't even the headline. The headline was Cade Cunningham, game-winning left-handed runner off the glass over 2 defenders, and then the game-saving block on the other end. The Pistons have the same amount of wins as the 3 seed in the East. They're 4-6. And I really want to talk about them because you were particularly high on them heading into the season for quite a few different reasons. And I'm not sure how much of the early season Pistons you've caught, or if you caught that game against the Hornets, or Hawks and Hornets they've played recently. But yeah, like what are your takeaways from this early season surge from the Pistons?
I did not in particular catch that Pistons game, the Pistons Hawks game. Words all over the place already, and we're 90 seconds into the pod.
Yep.
Great start. But I have caught a bit of Pistons basketball to start off the season. And number one, I'm glad that I think Cade's getting a little bit more recognition now, because I feel like Cade would be the one player that if you really watched him, I think you knew he was good. But the people that would actually watch him that knew he was good would actively be pissing off a lot of the other people that didn't watch Pistons basketball. Like, no, this is the guy every year in June or in August that NBA Twitter likes to gas up, and they win 16 games again. He's really, really good at basketball, guys.
Very.
I described his pace, and bro, he's actually one of the 5 players from everybody that I watched film on this summer that I think benefited the most from actually watching them, because they're like, man, this guy is nice. He has, I describe pace in the echelon of SGA, kind of Jalen Brunson, kind of herky-jerky type of pace, which is really, really tough to guard, especially if they're hitting shots. But I think the biggest thing for the Pistons is Jaden Ivey's kind of taking that year 3 jump that they were really, really hoping for. Beasley is adding so much spacing for this team, and I'm starting to hate the word spacing because I feel like it gets used a little too much for stuff.
Buzzword.
It's just a buzzword to act smart, I guess. But he truly is providing elite floor spacing for this team. And I'm going to give JB credit. I'm actually going to give both JB and Kenny Atkinson credit. I know we're not talking about the Cavs, but those were 2 hires that I kind of underrated, especially the Kenny one. The JB hire, I was kind of a little bit more optimistic on, from the standpoint of, look, this is the get the culture right hire, and then you'll hopefully get the long-term guy down the road. But for right now, man, JB's doing a really, really good job, I think, with the Detroit team. They're scrappy. They don't have a Sar back yet, I don't think. Are we ever going to get an update on when Asar Thompson's coming back?
I haven't heard a thing about him.
And honestly, this may be a hot take. I think they've been a little bit better than their 4-6 record indicates.
That's fair.
They've been as opening night, perfect example, dogfight with the Pacers. That they probably, no, I'm not going to say probably, they should have been the Pacers on opening night. They've had some other ones. You lose to Charlotte by 1 the game before. You lose to Miami in a game where they were up in most of, if I recall correctly. Lose by 6 to obviously the best team in the league in the Celtics. So I would argue there's teams a little bit better than their record indicates, and I'm happy for Pistons fans. I know a few of them, and I'm happy for them.
Yeah, I just love to harp on the point that Cade was already, we talked about when he kind of took the leap, or when he was going to take the leap, and I made the argument that he took the leap halfway through last season, and just nobody was really paying attention, and the Pistons were losing a lot of games, so it was it kind of got the empty stats label. But like you said, Cade's pace and his size and his touch as a shooter turned him into, I would say last year, probably one of the 10 best mid-range scorers in the league. maybe 10, 15. I don't know. I'd have to come up with a list. And that's only continued into this season. Like, the short mid-range has actually been considerably better than last year to go along with what he can already do from 10 to 16 and on long twos and whatnot. And so now we're talking about like a solidified top 10 mid-range scorer in the league who can just get to his spots at will. Pairs that with pretty good passing, is at least respectable as a three-point shooter. Like, he's not going to kill you from deep, but teams aren't going to leave him open. And I still think there's a lot left to be desired as a finisher, but in terms of just getting to the paint, very, very good at getting to the rim, creating that pressure, creating openings, and then that goes hand in hand with the improved shooting around him. I still think it's so funny because when Cade's going on like efficient stretches as a scorer, it gets overlooked by like how the Pistons are performing. So like when Cade goes on a stretch of, say he has a week of 28 points per game on 60% true shooting. These are completely made up numbers. But if the Pistons are losing, they'll kind of get overlooked. It'll be like, I mean, Cade's just kind of doing whatever. He's doing his thing. He's not really impacting. But it's funny, now that the Pistons are starting to win some games, people are looking at Cade's box score and saying, oh, this guy's a huge impact player. Like, Cade has had 3 straight triple-doubles.
Yeah.
He had 17, 11, and 11, 20, 10, and 10, and then 22, 11, and 13. And they were basically one shot away from being 3-0 during that stretch. But it's funny because these have been 3 of his least efficient games, both in terms of shooting percentage and turnovers. He had 7 turnovers in the last game.
Needs to dial back the turnovers. Per 75 possessions, he's at 5 turnovers per 75.
I was going to say, I'm going to not look too much into the 7 turnovers against Atlanta because I bet they were probably all Dyson Daniels, who's averaging 7 deflections a game.
Daniels stand account, by the way. I love
7
Dyson
deflections
Daniels.
a game if you're not aware. But yeah, the Pistons are interesting, and honestly, the craziest thing to me is that we talk about like Cade kind of raising the floor of this team and kind of carrying the offense as at times a lone creator. Did you know Detroit has the number 14 defense right now?
JB
They are
Bickerstaff.
an above average defense
With Jalen Duren as their starting center.
Yeah, it's like what? Okay, the personnel does not fit that bill. Like, if you were to tell me the Pistons were gonna be 4 and 6, I would expect it to be an offensive thing, not a defensive thing. Like you said, JB, but also like buy-in. Like Cade has looked legitimately good on defense, and which I guess comes back to JB getting those guys to buy in. Yeah, they're just a really fun, interesting team who I don't expect to make any serious noise, but as things currently stand, like you said, they're making every game close, and they're not, as a team last year that was just a walkover on the schedule for any playoff team. Now it's like, okay, we got to get ready for the Pistons because Cade's going to come at us with a near triple-double, get to his spots at will. Jalen Duren's going to do whatever he does on offense as a play finisher, playmaking hub at times. They've got shooters that can knock things down, so yeah, they're an interesting team, and I'm excited to watch how their season progresses.
Last thing before we kind of move on from the Pistons, Cade Cunningham this season, he's shooting. He's taking 7.1 mid-range attempts per 75 possessions, and in the mid-range he's shooting 51%.
Oh my goodness!
From the mid-range this season.
That's like Kyrie numbers.
Like, Cade Cunningham is just good at basketball, folks.
Yeah.
This team's good, or better than we gave him credit for.
And you know what's and one more point on Cade is I remember coming into the league, the actualized version, like a lot of people who were high on Cade even kind of said that they view Cade as an off guard, and they think like he's gonna develop into like a really, really good secondary creator, and he'll never like have the handle and because he's kind of like, I don't want to say he's inathletic, but he's not super explosive. Like, they kind of were like, he probably won't be able to generate the type of pressure to be a true number one. And that's why a lot of people were high on the Jaden Ivey pick. They were like, Jaden Ivey's going to be that primary advantage creator, and Cade's going to be the off guard. It's been the complete opposite. Like, Cade clearly has turned into like a legit number one. And yeah, as the Pistons grow, as they continue to build through the draft, like Ron Hollins looked pretty awesome. Yeah, the Pistons got a lot going on, and I think Cade is like developing into that franchise cornerstone.
Another team that has a lot going on. They had a little bit of I don't. It's not a rivalry game, but there's a rivalry element for one of their players, Jordan Poole. That's the Washington Wizards. They played the Warriors a couple nights ago. I'm pretty sure that wasn't their most recent game, but that was the way I wanted to tie in them to the next segment. The Wizards, they're 2-5, so nothing too spectacular, like if you're talking about records. But another team I think is kind of playing better than some people may have expected. What are your thoughts on this Wizards team that's really, really young and exciting, honestly?
Yeah, my thing with the Wizards is I think they're fun to watch, and I think there's a lot of like interesting pieces to look at and kind of project forward. But like in terms of just how they've coexisted and played together this season, they've been objectively terrible. Like it's kind of like it's expected from a young team that doesn't really have a hierarchy yet. I think they've had the number 29 offense and number 28 defense. So we're talking about just like bottom of the barrel team.
27 offense, 28 defense. Yeah, pretty much.
So it's like, they're not playing well. But I think there's a lot of things you can really focus in on and be like, yes, I really like this for the Wizards moving forward. I think the first thing is Bilal Coulibaly's play.
Yes.
He's been really awesome as like a semi-transition attacker, and then in the half court playing off the catch as like a knockdown spot-up shooter who can slash, move the ball. I would actually probably consider passing a bit of a weakness for him, but like there's flashes where he makes really, really spectacular passes. There was one against, I want to say Miami, I could be wrong, where he goes baseline on a drive, goes up with the left and uses his super long arm to wrap a left-handed laydown around a defender at the rim and then drops it off to probably Valanciunas or something. So, yeah, and then on defense, he's been like their go-to guy at the point of attack. I actually think he's kind of cut from the same cloth if you just look at like player comps.
He makes the Kawhi comparison?
No. I can't. And I was going to say there's one stout difference that I'll get to with Kawhi.
Okay.
I was going to say I think Bilal is the type of defender that Jaden McDaniels is. Very fluid mover, very lengthy, will make weak side stuff, but you kind of want him on the ball because he can just really take ball handlers out of their comfort zone with his length and agility. But like Jaden McDaniels, powerful creators kind of have their will against Bilal, and we'll see how that develops because he's only 20, 21 years old, and that's not unusual for a young defender. But like specifically, Jimmy Butler in the Miami game was just like bullying Bilal just over and over again, and it was like Bilal, all he could really do is kind of foul. And that's similar to Jaden McDaniels. He gets into foul trouble when he faces a guy like Luka who's going to use his shoulder, take advantage of size. And that's the difference with Kawhi. Like Kawhi was a brick wall in addition to everything else.
Yeah.
So yeah, I would say that's the one difference. But like in terms of just scoring upside, flashes as a playmaker, and then legit point of attack resistance this early, Bilal is projecting to be like a serious star level player. And then you also have Alex Sarr, who I think has had pretty rough moments, but you have a silver lining where it's super mobile defensive big who's just shutting down the rim. Like really, really good shot blocker, really talented on switches and defending out in space. And then you have the play of Jordan Poole. Like, Jordan Poole gets a lot of flack, but he's playing probably the best basketball of his career on both ends right now. Like, we were talking about it off camera before our last episode where he's averaging like 1.5 blocks or something stupid. And like 3 steals.
Yeah, 3 steals, something crazy.
Yeah, like he's been everywhere on defense with his hands and length. And then on offense, I mean, we all know what Jordan Poole can do as a ball handler, as a slasher, as a pull-up three-point shooter. Yeah, I think there's a lot to like with the Wizards when you look at it from an individual standpoint. It's just going to take some time to actualize into team wins.
So this was just the sicko in me heading into the season. As you guys have known, I've talked about it in the past, had the preseason power ranking series. I, very understandably so, I feel, dreaded doing the Nets episode. They were dead last for me. I dreaded it. I talked like 15 minutes about Cam Thomas and Nick Claxton, maybe throw Cam Johnson in there, and then spent the other 20 minutes talking about the entire rest of the team. And most episodes, Tyler like an hour long per team, and that one was like maybe 40 minutes. But you get to the Wizards episode, and I'm like, man, like this team is going to be really bad. But I think the goal by the end of the season is to kind of get to where they may already be at right now, which is Bilal year 2 progression. Alex R up and down bumps in year 1, but you like see enough of the ups to where you start to feel good about yourself. Jordan Poole, weirdly kind of being the locker room guy here as he's the vet.
Yeah.
I mean, you have Valanciunas here too. But Jordan Poole's hooping. He's been really fun to watch, and I think we might have been texting off camera one time. And you're like, "Hey, we love a good pool party," and Jordan Poole is still, when he kind of gets going, I'm not going to make put a number on this, but he's one of the more entertaining players in the league once he gets going.
For sure.
So you really focused on Alex Sarr, Bilal Coulibaly. We kind of both touched on Jordan Poole, but I want to talk about Bub Carrington.
I was hoping you'd bring him up. Yeah.
Okay. I loved Bub Carrington coming out. My comp for Bub Carrington was kind of like D'Angelo Russell, but the good parts of D'Lo, that sounds awful, but
I get it.
D'Lo, and that's what I felt really, really good about. I've loved his defensive activity. He's not by any means a good to great defender, but I think he has the tools to be an average defender kind of in his prime once he gets there in a couple of years. The playmaking, the ability to be a guy that's wanting the ball in his hands a lot at Pittsburgh. He was Pittsburgh's offense when he was in college. You've seen the flashes in the shot making, the playmaking ability, which is awesome because, I mean, Bilal, Sarr, you want to throw in Keyshawn George into the mix, who a guy I didn't like but has shown flashes. You need the guy to kind of set the table for those guys. And that's Bub Carrington. They have Corey Kispert, too, who's one of my favorite role players in the league.
Love him.
They move the ball pretty nicely, too. Like, they have a decent little motion system that they're running here in Washington. So, watch more Wizards game, man. This group is bad. This is a bad team. Do not get me wrong. I mean, like we said, they're bottom 4 in both offensive and defensive rating. But they have pieces, and it's not going to be next year either, but 2026 to 27.
2026. That's the year. You heard it here first. Wow, that was rough. The 2026-2027 Wizards are going to win the championship, according to Sean Davis.
Not cut producer, just edit that one out.
Funny is, I'm the producer, so I'm not cutting.
Executive producer. YouTube.
What's funny is the Wizards actually passed the Bulls in pace. We were talking about how crazy fast the Bulls play.
Yeah.
Wizards are just like, and it's completely out of control, but it's the fun type of out of control. Like you take the good with the bad. And I'm glad you mentioned Bub being like that table setter for them because I do think as talented of a scorer as Bilal seems to be, I do feel like an actualized version of him is still more of an off the catch weapon than a guy you really, really run your offense through as like the lead on ball guy. And I guess I would have said the same about a young Kawhi, so we'll have to see how that projects. I mean, Kawhi kind of had one of the most outlier developments as a ball handler we've ever seen. Same with Paul George, which is crazy. Like Paul George and Kawhi were both 3-and-D guys who became elite ball handlers for no reason. So we'll have to see what happens with Bilal in terms of that development. But yeah, I think the big thing with them is the fact that they have 3. I feel like we both agree they have 3 core pieces, which is Bub Carrington, Bilal, and Alex Sarr. And even though they're all like 20 years old right now, there aren't any diminishing returns. Mm-hmm. And that's something you love to see because we talked about how much of a problem that's been for Houston with figuring out where to go. The Wizards have a clear direction, which is awesome to see from such a young team.
Yeah. And then, like, Kuz played?
He played the first few games, and he was not playing good.
Yeah.
He was not playing good. But, like, I like Kuz. Yeah, I like Kuz a lot. I just think it was a slow start. Let's talk about the Hornets, though. Let's talk about the Hornets because
we're talking about all the teams we just liked to start the year.
Yeah, they're like in a similar vein to the Pistons and Wizards in terms of like a young team who probably isn't in a position to really do a lot of damage, but like is just this frisky, fun to watch, explosive team that can beat a playoff team in multiple
that you
times.
Don't really want to play if they have if they have a good night. Like Charlotte has a good night, it's gonna be a dog fight. Like they blitzed the Pacers, which I guess this year doesn't say much.
What's funny is the Hornets are kind of like their success has basically just been what you and I both said in our season projection episode, and it was like, what if LaMelo and Brandon Miller are just both all-star level players? Like, what does that mean for their floor? And Brandon Miller is coming off a crazy game. LaMelo's just had a crazy season in general. Yeah, I was gonna say, like, he's just a crazy player. Yeah, what are your what temperature check? How are you feeling about the Hornets right now?
I need to find this one ridiculous stat right quick. I saw it posted on Twitter. But I think to start, LaMelo Ball is an all-star. I think we've already known that. The stat is that this just goes to LaMelo's insane shot-making ability. LaMelo Ball this season on step backs in particular, which is
I saw this.
insane.
Yes.
Hold on. Okay.
It was LaMelo like 57.5% on threes.
LaMelo Ball on step backs this season, in general, he is shooting 13 for 23 on step back threes, which for effective field goal percentage would be 84.
I think that's 56.5 just raw percent.
Yeah, 56 per half, 56.5 raw field goal percentage, 84.8% effective field goal percentage on step back threes.
It's all right.
That's okay. Like, you know,
right.
Braun's looking at his left hand and shooting or whatever the hell it was. Is probably more efficient. But no, this is, again, kind of similar to KAT, I feel, where it's, this guy's just good. And maybe I've also kind of been victim of overthinking LaMelo in the past as well, but I'm glad, I guess, coming into this season, I've kind of been on the right side of the LaMelo Ball or conversation, which is essentially, dude, please just stay healthy. You're really good at this basketball thing. And then Brandon Miller had that weird glute-related injury, I think it was. But, I mean, he immediately comes back, immediately makes an impact. And bro, really the main thing is, and I'm glad you kind of touched on with our early preview discussion about this Hornets team, these two dudes play so well off each other.
Awesome. Yes.
They can run so many actions. Like they ran like a double drag set where you have Brandon Miller be the first screener. You have, I don't know, like Mark Williams and Nick Richards have the second screen. And you let LaMelo kind of come off of it, and they have the throwback screen. So throwback meaning essentially the last screener, which is the big, he goes to sets like a pin down for Brandon Miller within the first screener. And it's just another creative way to involve both players in three-man action. And it's Brandon Miller an elite off-screen threat, and then LaMelo Ball an elite pick-and-roll, like, playmaking or decision-making in general threat off of ball screens. And it's awesome. This team's really, really fun to watch. They have a couple of winnable games coming up. I mean, really, really winnable games, actually. They got, I want to say, is Philly with no Tyrese Maxey, no Embiid. Orlando, which Orlando could still be kind of tough because of their defense. Milwaukee's a dumpster fire right now. They face them at home in Charlotte.
And I'd like to point out that Milwaukee's biggest weakness is backcourt defense. So who's guarding Miller and LaMelo?
Yeah, right.
Who's guarding either of those guys? I think there's only one thing that I'm a little bit worried about with LaMelo, in terms of the way he's playing right now, and it's that for years now, and I would still say it is, coming into the league, LaMelo's superhuman ability was his passing and like vision, just like in terms of just making crazy home run passes that are going to result in layups. Mm-hmm. And it feels like with the way he's approaching the game right now as a scorer, as a shooter, it's good, but I do worry that it's getting to a point where he's so score first that the superhuman ability is getting put on the back burner. And I'd love to see him closer to 9-10 assists than like the 6-7 we're seeing him at right now.
Yeah.
I'm not sure if that's a hot take. I feel like everyone kind of would agree with that, but like my favorite thing about LaMelo is the way he approaches the game like a street baller. Like the stuff he does is just so unorthodox that it makes for just this incredible watch. And I'm all in on the Hornets. I wouldn't be surprised if they're a serious play-in team.
So kind of my take to, I guess, my response to the LaMelo passing take is, One, I will say I haven't like specifically watched like some of his playmaking attempts or him using like pick and rolls and if he had potential opportunities, I'll just say to utilize kind of his superpower, if you want to call it that, as the playmaker and high level facilitator. I will say this though, like pre-watching that, I'm with you if the turnovers are going to be this high. When you're averaging 10 assists and you're at 4.6 turnovers, I can live with that. When it's 6 to 4.6, so like barely, like not even like 1.5 to 1. No, that's about 1.5 to 1, right? I could do math. No,
I think it's lower. 1.3 maybe.
Yeah, like 1.3 to 1. That sounds a little bit right. When it's that, then okay, we have a little bit more of a problem. But yeah, I've been watching enough of that. But that sounds about right for right now. The perfect dream scenario is like, bro, you get back to game 1 where it's 34 and 11 on 2 turnovers. I mean, that's dream case scenario. But where you get the balance, more of a balance of the elite shooting and shot making plus the elite superpower of the playmaking as well. Combined.
And I feel like that will trend in the right direction as Brandon Miller continues to evolve as like that number 1 scorer. Because I do think the idealized version of Charlotte is Brandon Miller is the number 1 scorer and LaMelo's the number 1 creator. That's how I feel like they would have the best ceiling moving forward.
Yeah.
But yeah, some other guys I wanted to talk about real quick, just kind of while we're talking about surprises, I guess, in the East. This wasn't a surprise for me. It was a surprise for a lot of people who viewed this as a lose-lose trade. But both KAT and Randle are playing arguably the best basketball of their careers.
KAT's been the best player.
Here. Yeah, Karl Anthony Towns is averaging 24, 13, and 3 on 65% true shooting.
Is the 3-point volume still down? I know we talked about this on the last.
No, 3-point volume is back up to like 4.5, and he's shooting 50%.
Okay.
He's been on fire. He's been on fire as a post scorer. His turnovers are way down, even though he's kind of initiating the same amount of offense. And then Julius Randle's averaging 22, 7, and 4 on 66% true shooting, 60% from 2. Randle has just been on fire as a secondary creator for Minnesota. Like, everyone saw the Wolves lose KAT, and kind of rightfully so, we're worried about Minnesota's spacing. Minnesota's 3-point shooting. Yeah, so this is like
this is the spacing conversation, and I think we just need to like title this episode "We Hate Spacing," or I don't know, because again, I didn't want to cut you off, but that's like the Julius Randle thing's a perfect situation for like why like spacing is more just a buzzword now, because you responded to the tweet about Anthony Edwards being a top 5 slasher in the league. I'm like, or one of the best slasher in the league. And dog, that's first off. John Moran exists, Zion Williamson exists, Giannis exists. 3 players off the dome that clear. Shea, another one, Luka. Like, Anyway, But a lot of my mentions in response to that was, well, you know, the spacing got worse. Okay, KAT, as elite of a shooter as he is, honestly, the spacing isn't as different. If anything, Julius Randle's gravity that he still creates from his ability to be an advantage creator and legitimately attack mismatches is still really, really important for that team. I think that's why people overthought the Timberwolves trade and thought they were going to be bad after game 1 when they lost to the Lakers, where we both said, no, that's a really bad matchup for them. Gabe Randle, literally the next game, he balls out, and he's been balling out ever since, and we're seeing that they're reaping the benefits offensively from that trade. Again, sorry to cut you off. Please continue.
No, you kind of hit it on the head where I was going with it anyways. I had a few points. Like, KAT, elite floor spacer, but part of the big draw with him as a spacer is the fact that he's pulling opposing bigs. Like, when he's pulling an opposing big, the rim is just so vulnerable, and that's what we're seeing for New York. Like, they're running 5 out. He's pulling opposing centers out of the paint, and driving lanes are just so easy. Like, McHale's been playing really well inside the arc and things like that. But KAT was playing the 4 in Minnesota. The 5 was guarding Gobert, so KAT was only stretching wings anyways, and so the effect was kind of nullified. But now with Randle, we're seeing, okay, he's still going to stretch wings. He's not going to knock down shots at the level of KAT. But his ability to apply downhill pressure, demand double teams, collapse the defense, and spray it out to the corners has actually led to Minnesota being a better three-point shooting team overall this year than last year. Like, there are a couple factors which we're going to get into a little bit more in a different topic, but Randall's ability to create downhill pressure has been one of the catalysts to them being an elite three-point shooting team this year. And I said it back then, people overthink talent. I've said it like 3 times on the podcast. I said it in a video before we even started the podcast. Like, I viewed it as a win-win trade because both teams needed the talent upgrade in certain areas. And the Knicks are 4-4. The Wolves, I think, are 6-3. I'm still comfortable calling it a win-win for now. How do you feel? Like, do you think it's a win-lose, lose-win, win-win, lose-lose? Like, where are you at on the trade overall?
So my opening 10-minute post-trade reaction was the Knicks won this trade. My 2 days later reaction was okay, I see it. It makes sense financially for the Wolves, and I think Randall does some stuff for them. But then KAT's also balling out, so I'm more on the side of it's been one of the more win-win deals we've seen in the last few years.
Yeah, and it's crazy because they're two such polarizing players that everyone was so opinionated on the trade. And I guess I want to ask you one more question before we move on, and it relates to KAT and the Knicks trade. KAT isn't a great screener, and he's not much of a roller. And Jalen Brunson has started the season very porous compared to what we've come to get used to with him.
Hold on. Can you restart the start of the question? My mind just blanked for 5 seconds.
I was saying KAT's probably one of his biggest offensive weaknesses is screening and rolling.
Sure.
It's just not something he's very good at. And we saw Brunson playing off of an elite screener and playing really, really well for the last year or two. And Brunson started this season slow. And I wanted to kind of ask you, I'm not calling Brunson a screen merchant, but do you think this is a new version of Brunson we can get used to seeing? Just not the same type of impact without that great screener, or is it just a slow start?
With great players, I am typically going to lean on the side of it's just a slow start. But I also do want to see, we have a long way before we get there.
Yeah.
What is he like? Does this change at all when Mitchell Robinson does get back eventually?
Is KAT and Robinson going to play together? What?
Right, because that would be big. Now, again, it's so hard to rely on Mitchell Robinson, which is why they can't even really do it. But that was kind of the one drawback I think everybody had on the Knicks this summer was, even if they kept the roster as it was, right, and it was Randall here instead of KAT, and maybe even more then, but it's bro, godly, they have no bigs. And then KAT, as fun as he's been offensively, he is one of the worst drop bigs in the league.
Yeah,
he's so bad.
So hard to watch.
So I think if you're able to use KAT and Mitchell Robinson or KAT and another big, if they're, by the grace of God, able to make a deadline move for a big, I would feel a little bit better about this Knicks team. But I think having a real vertical spacer, going back to the spacing word, in terms of lob catching ability and good screen setting, I do think that would matter for Brunson, because then that's when Brunson is able to be super elite at getting you on his hip, playing with his pace in the in-between game. And that could be really, really important, where you do lose that with KAT, because KAT's a pick and pop there primarily.
You know what's funny? I actually, one of the main points I made in my video about the KAT trade was I worry about, their ability to construct an elite two-way lineup. And it was I kind of just hinted at it when I said KAT is so much more effective as a floor spacer and really just so much more valuable as an offensive player when he's at the 5. But it kind of feels difficult to build a great defense with him at the 5 because of how many limitations he has. And I was okay, if they play KAT alongside Robinson, I think they can build a really, really good defensive lineup.
Yeah.
But you're not getting the same type of offensive value out of KAT. But if you run KAT at the 5, you can probably put together one of the 3 best offenses in the NBA, but your defensive ceiling is just so limited because KAT's such a weak defensive 5. And one of the points I focused on was that McHale is kind of not a valuable defender if there's not a great drop big by him. Like, his whole thing is using his length to stay attached and then, like, playing from the hip or from behind and just bothering smaller ball handlers with his length. Well, if you don't have a good drop big, that is completely useless. And so it's like McHale hasn't really looked like a good defender. OG has basically just been their entire defense to start the season.
OG's so good.
And and what's funny is, like, I was like, okay, so I think the starting five for the Knicks is going to be like one of the greatest offensive lineups in the league. And it's kind of funny. It's only been 8 games, and the Knicks have the number 3 offense and the number 17 defense. So I'm like, yeah, that's kind of what I expected. We'll have to see how that changes when Mitchell Robinson gets back.
And they're number 3 in offense with Brunson not being great so far.
I was going to say, like, this team is clearly a top 3 to 5 offense, and I wouldn't expect anything different in the playoffs. But yeah, I want to rewind back to what we were saying about Minnesota's 3-point shooting, and about Randle creating threes, and because the main catalyst for the team improving as a 3-point shooting team is the fact that Anthony Edwards is apparently the greatest shooter of all time now. He is shooting 48% from 3 on 11.6 attempts a game. Just as a reference.
Just stupid.
Yeah, just as a reference, he's making 5.6 3-pointers per game, which over 82 games would be 459 threes. 2016 Steph made 402, right? Wasn't that the record? It was like, this is an unbreakable 402 record. So, yeah, Anthony Edwards shooting like better than 2016 Steph. My question, though, is this a good thing? Because that's kind of what the conversation's been. Everyone's like, should he still be shooting this many? Okay, as long as he's shooting 48%, he should shoot a 3 every time he can see the basket. Like, a 48% 3 is like an 140 offensive rating. So, yeah, I want him shooting that 3 every time. He was talking about it in the post-game interview. In their last game, I can't remember who they played. They were going under screens. They were going under the screen. And he just kept shooting the 3 over and over and over again. He had 9 threes through 3 quarters. And it was like, yeah, that's what he's supposed to do when they're going to go under the screen. What I worry about is like the De'Aaron Fox thing, where De'Aaron Fox had this one, we just talked about it with LaMelo, a superhuman ability. De'Aaron Fox's was his speed and his slashing. And he worked on his pace, improved as a mid-range shooter, improved as a 3-point shooter, improved as a passer, and just improved as a floor general overall. But as he improved in all these categories, he went more and more away from the superhuman slashing. And so it's like, okay, yeah, he's a more well-rounded and skilled player, but is he even as valuable as he was when he was just a slasher, because that was his number 1 ability? That's what I worry about with Edwards, because I made a tweet today kind of jokingly. Anthony Edwards is currently averaging less field goal attempts at the rim than Buddy Hield. And if you don't know, Buddy Hield's not much of a slasher. So that worries me, because I think Anthony Edwards, his superhuman ability is his slashing. It's his first step. That's what's made him so unschemable in the playoffs, because there's no one who can stay in front of him. And I think this season should be about finding the best balance. Like, I don't think 12 3-point attempts a game is the ideal shot diet for Anthony Edwards, unless he's shooting like 48% like he is now. But yeah, if he can get that to like even just 39 to 40% on like 8, 9, 10 attempts a game, and then all of those other attempts are just going to the rim, like getting downhill, I think it's like, I mean, is the ideal shot diet for Anthony Edwards like a 2019 James Harden? Is that like, because I don't think I would say Edwards is probably a pretty weak mid-range scorer overall. At least in the regular season. In the playoffs, I don't know what the heck happens.
In the playoffs, he turned into Kevin Durant. Or, Kobe.
Say, I don't know what that's about. But, yeah, I just wanted to, like, kind of do a little rant and then ask you, like, do you think it's a good thing for Ant to continue shooting this much? Or are you a little bit worried about the long-term effects on his tendencies as an attacker?
So, the Anthony Edwards shooting discussion is such, like, a tough one. Because I do think legitimately teams are so worried about the slashing to where, to Ant's kind of credit, I am just going to pull and kind of make you pay. And I think the hope is that defenses kind of react now at some point here soon and stop doing that to where you, I think, see a more natural regression from the insane three-point volume because, oh, my God, we're not just going to keep letting him get free reign on these threes. Like the Mavs game, for example, that entire first half, it felt like, all right, we're just going to go under. Oh, hey, deep ball screen from 30 feet. Yeah, we'll just go under that. Oh, no, Anthony Edwards has hit 5 in a row. Oh, man, it doesn't matter now. And I tried to look at some of the playoff data while you were talking there to see if, like, okay, maybe it's like an overcorrection from like bad playoff performance on like pull-up shooting and stuff like that. Anthony Edwards in the playoffs last season in the playoffs, shot 38% on pull-up threes. He shot 48.5% on pull-up twos. He shot 34.5%, I want to say it was, percent on 34.9% on pull-up on pick and roll threes. But he shot 45% rounding up on isolation threes. So like the self-created threes, like those kind of combined to get that 38% number.
The James Harden
where this year he's at 52% on pick and roll threes. And 38.5 on isolation threes. So right now I'm going to say that if this is the trend going forward, then I'd be pretty concerned. Because I think what does make Ant so special is that first step, the ability to just blow by anybody, and in the half court setting more specifically. Like in transition, there's a lot of really good open floor athletes, a lot of them in the NBA, but what makes Ant so special is the ability to do that consistently in the half court whenever he wants to, it feels like. And I do understand the sentiment that you don't want him to get too attached to it. And I also wonder, too, maybe if he's kind of compensated for the fact that his in-between game, at least in the regular season, is kind of – I mean, is it that or the playmaking that's the biggest weakness? Is it still the playmaking probably?
Yeah, I'm kind of 50-50. I think they're both, like – yeah, I would say they're both pretty notable weaknesses.
But those are too easily the drawback.
So, and I was going to say – and ideally – it gets to a point where like teams are expecting the three, they start overplaying that, and then it's like, oh, now I have even easier driving lanes. And then it's like that's the James Harden thing, where it's like, okay, sit back, step back three, press up, I'm blowing by you and either lobbing it or getting to a floater. So I'm still waiting to see like how it trends and whether or not teams start to overcorrect for it.
Yeah. So Timberwolves are definitely gonna be a team on the watch list. Another team that we've both kept in close tabs on has, I think, the best player in the league. He's probably been the best player in the league for a few years now.
Is it a debate? Like, seriously, is there a serious debate that Jokic isn't number one?
Who would you even say is number one?
Like, I would say the discussion has to be like Giannis, Luka, or Embiid. But like,
I feel like there's an easy argument to take out all those guys. There's a fairly easy argument.
I feel like they all have like just such notable weaknesses that you can point to. Where it's with Jokic, it's like you have to start grasping at straws. Like, oh, look at opponent's field goal percentage at the rim, and then it's like, okay, that accounts for what 8 points per game because he's contesting 4 shots at the rim. Like, I don't seriously.
Who would you say out of the next 4 has like is the toughest to make an argument against? Shockingly enough, I'm gonna say Embiid, and I think it's just like because if someone says, okay, take the playoffs out of it because Embiid's never been healthy in the playoffs, and we're just assuming full health. Yeah. Then I feel like you could make a regular season argument that Embiid is the best player in the league. I would say that's the one. On my last year's rankings, I had Giannis number 2, and it goes into a lot of the playoff stuff because I value playoffs over everything. But yeah, I think if it's just in terms of like who would be the toughest to argue against, it would be from the standpoint of like, okay, let's not talk about the playoffs. Let's just talk about what Embiid's done in the regular season. Yeah.
And
for Luka, it would be like just not talk defense. Although I will say for Luka, I think he's the best offensive player in the league.
I disagree.
And like Jokic is a very close second.
My thing with Luka is I think if it's put the ball in one guy's hands and generate the best offense, I think Luka is number one.
Okay, yeah.
But I don't think Luka does a lot of the little things that Jokic does, like off-ball movement. Jokic has like a unique spacing value because he has the ability to pull fives, like we talked about with KAT.
Yeah, this episode just needs to be titled "The Conversation About Spacing." Like, there's your title.
Exactly. Opens up the offense for those cuts and stuff. I think Jokic is a much quicker decision maker off the catch, like in terms of connecting the offense. Like Luka has a tendency to catch the ball with an advantage and kind of like, okay, now I'm gonna reset the possession. And then like the screen and roll stuff. Like Jokic enables ball handlers in a way that any other all-time great offensive player besides maybe Steph and Shaq can't. Yeah, I just think Jokic is like such an elite on-ball player, but then also has all of those little things mastered that like no other player can really kind of replicate.
What was your 5 through 10? I know we're not trying to do like a whole rankings here, but I'm putting you on the spot. What was your 5 through 10?
Player rankings from last year?
Or heading into this year?
I think 5. Okay, so I want to preface this. It was full strength because who I say at number 6 is going to get
Oh, yeah,
cooked.
I know it's Kawhi. Kawhi's 6.
Yeah, so 5 Shea, 6 Kawhi. 7, I want to say, was Tatum.
Okay.
8, I think, was... Oh, I'm like blanking. 8, 9 was KD or LeBron. 8 and 9 was KD and LeBron. I can't remember who I had ahead. I want to say 8 was LeBron, 9 was KD.
Yeah.
And then 10 was Steph.
Okay.
Then I had AD 11.
Okay. Since you brought up AD, shout out to my guy, Crane Basketball on Twitter, Lakers content creator. He had this tweet about, because we've been talking about AD's transition defense. The Lakers half-court defense, the Lakers defense in general, after a made bucket would be good for, I think it was 8th in the league in defensive rating. The Lakers defense after a miss is dead last in the league, if I recall correctly.
Checks out with the eye test, for sure. For sure. And I think AD deserves a bulk of blame for that, but not all of it. Like, it's a team issue. I mean, LeBron deserves a bulk of blame, too, because when's the last time he made a second effort in the regular season?
Yeah. But
yeah,
anyway,
and
go ahead.
Yeah, I just want to finish this off with Jokic's averages. Because, that's always a fun exercise. Jokic right now through 9 games is averaging 29 points, 13 rebounds, 11 assists on 66% true shooting. What in the world is that? What is that? Even crazier. The Nuggets have been a plus 12 net rating with Jokic on the floor. You want to know what they were in the championship year?
Plus 8?
Plus 12. They were the same. They're playing at the same level as they were during the championship year with Jokic on the floor. Gordon and Murray missed multiple games. They had to figure out a weird situation with their bench and who to give minutes to. Christian Brown's been awesome. Westbrook's been playing really good recently. When Jokic was off the floor in the championship year, they were negative 10, which, just speaks to the impact of Jokic. This year with Jokic off the floor, they are negative 23 points per 100 possessions. Negative 23. He has a plus 35 on off, dude. So, yeah, I mean, the guy is just superhuman. He hasn't had a bad game. I don't know if he's ever going to have a bad game this whole season. Did you see the interview where they asked him if he thought he's had a bad game?
No, I have not. What did he say?
They asked him in a post-game interview if he thought he's had a bad game. And he said, yeah, I think that second loss we had, I didn't play very well. And the interviewer said, you had 41 points. And he said, oh, no. So, and then he said, well, maybe could have been a little bit more aggressive in the first OKC game. I think he had 16, 13, and 13 or something. I don't know. Yeah. The guy doesn't have bad games. And it's he's shooting a career high from 3. Including self putbacks, I think his true shooting percentage is actually 70. So yeah, I don't know what to do with this guy. I've said multiple times that I think he has an argument to be the GOAT offensive player. And it's every year he comes back and does something even crazier to where it's okay, when am I just going to say he's the GOAT offensive player?
Do it.
I can't commit to it yet. My good friend Carson Breber has committed to it from Nerd Sesh. Last time I talked to him, Yeah, last time I talked to him, he said Jokic is the offensive GOAT. I'm still rolling with Steph, but yeah, it's a conversation. I think there's like a big five. I think it's Steph, Michael Jordan, LeBron, Jokic, and Magic. Order them however you want. That's my five.
GOAT offensive player?
GOAT offensive player overall. Like just everything that happens on offense, effect on a team's offense. I think that's the five.
All right, so I'm going to put you in a crazy bind. This is damn near impossible. Wait, no, it shouldn't be, because I'm assuming when you say good offensive player, we're talking about like at their peaks, right? I'm assuming.
Yes, straight peak, not considering longevity.
Okay. That's tough. That's tough.
And I would say the other names that come to mind that I wouldn't have in my five, but are just like in that same like discussion, would be Shaq, Kobe, Larry Bird. I'd say Steve Nash. I'd say Luka, Harden. I feel like I'm missing somebody. Kevin Durant is probably somewhere in there, but he's not the same type of playmaker that a lot of guys are. But yeah, like I have a big five, and I think Jokic is, I mean, probably on the higher end of that five. Like, is he my number two? I don't know.
All right, so question, what year are we taking from each guy when we consider the peak?
For my five, I would say 2016 Steph.
Okay.
I would say,
23
Jokic right now,
or 25 Jokic?
I would say Jokic right now, probably.
Okay.
LeBron, I would probably say 2018.
If we're talking peak Bron offensively, like,
yeah, I would say the discussion would be 18, 17, or 14. Those are my three big LeBron years.
Okay.
For just offense.
Yeah.
If you include defense, I'd say it's like 13 and 09,
13.
like the big two.
Yeah.
But then I'd say for Magic, I'd say 87. I think that's like a clear number one for him, would be 87. Jordan, I'm going to go 91. First championship year. Best combination of skill and athleticism to me. I'm actually not that high on second three-peat Jordan. I think like he pretty clearly was better before he retired the first time. And then who's my last player? I just named all five. Named all five. Yeah, I feel pretty confident in those being the years. I guess a more interesting one would be like, what year would KD be?
My mind immediately went to 14 or 17.
I agree. That's my two, and I would say 14 is the one.
Yeah.
Because that was like
14 KD is just insane.
The athleticism to go along with his skill was just crazy.
Yeah.
Crazy.
Am I crazy for like having? I'm still trying to think about the list. Like Magic 5. Is that crazy?
That's probably my five. It feels crazy because like, just in terms of like, I think Magic's probably by far the GOAT playmaker. Like just in terms of like maximizing everyone.
Yeah.
But I will say out of that five, I do think Magic's a criminally underrated scorer. But out of that five, I do think Magic is by far the weakest link in terms of like, we need you to go out there and score 30 points a game for us and like really carry us. I think Magic benefited from playing with other guys who could score at such a high level.
Okay. So this would be, I guess, my Magic 5. I don't feel good about any of this. Magic 5. Bron 4?
Oh, dude, it just sucks to say.
I'm low-key going.
How can you?
I'm low-key going Jokic 3, MJ 2, Steph 1. Low-key. I don't feel good about any of that, though.
Dude, it sounds so bad to say LeBron 4.
And LeBron's like my actual GOAT, too, so that just feels weird coming from me.
Same. Yeah, I think LeBron's the GOAT. The last time I did it, so this was probably over a year ago. This feels even worse than what you just said. I don't know what I would go with now, but I did it like a year ago, and I had LeBron 5. I had Jokic 4, Magic 3, and then MJ 2, Steph 1. And now I'm kind of like,
no, I think Magic because of the scoring, because like the clear, kind of like you said, the clear cut, like get us a bucket.
But then couldn't you counter that argument with saying like Steph and MJ, you can't put the ball in their hands and expect them to create for everyone like Magic?
Sure, like, but then honestly, then that's more of an argument to bump Bron up more. If we're being honest,
he can do both, and that's Jokic. Jokic and LeBron can do both.
Yeah,
I don't know. And then Steph for me, the reason I have Steph
gravity.
It's the off-ball stuff.
It's
It's like
the
there's
gravity.
nothing like it. There's nothing. And you know what's crazy? I guess an even hotter take. On my last list, I had Nash number 6. He was my first guy out of that 5. And it's the same thing it's the same argument as Magic. Like in terms of just putting the ball in that guy's hands and expecting him to create the best offense for everyone else.
Yeah.
I would say Nash is the number 2 guy in that category.
That's fair. That's interesting.
And then of course Nash with the hyper efficiency. We've gone completely off the rails, by the way.
Yeah,
we
this has been its own
about,
segment.
We went from talking about Anthony Edwards and Jokic to Steve Nash's playmaking.
But to get things back on track and to wrap things up, injuries suck. There's been a lot of injuries. The Pelicans basically don't have a team. Pelicans fans, we didn't forget about you. I just don't think there's a lot of excitement to talk about Jeremiah Robinson Earl. No disrespect. But yeah, they just don't have a basketball team. KD, who's been so good. We just talked about him on the last episode. Good. He's out with like a calf strain for 2 weeks. Ja has a hamstring thing. He's out for some time. Scottie Pippen Jr., which, by the way, is balling. Shout out to him. Had a triple-double.
He had a triple-double.
Yep. I wasn't the biggest Scottie Pippen Jr. fan when he's on the Lakers. I thought he was a little erratic and kind of out of control. But he's playing way more under control now. Love his game now. Turned into a really, really good defender.
And I don't want to cut you off, but I did want to get one more point out on Scottie Pippen Jr. before you move on. I didn't watch him much in the Lakers, so I don't really know what you had seen from him. The first time I really started watching him was in the preseason this year, and I remember I made a tweet. I was like, dude, Scottie Pippen Jr. preseason hoops is beautiful basketball. Yeah, I think he's a really good player.
He's a completely different player now, I think. Maybe I was just weirdly hating on him when he was on the Lakers, but when he was in LA, I was like, man, he's a walking turnover. He's erratic. He's got to get that under control. I thought he was an okay playmaker, but he's turned into a really, really good player.
And defender. He's been defending his butt off. Yeah.
Zion now, again, he has another hamstring thing. Those are just the worst to deal with. And then there's another easy. I mean, you have Kawhi. Kawhi's hurt, obviously. We've talked about that in the past. And then out east, you got the Paulo injury right after the 51-point game. You got Tyrese Maxey now dealing. He's out with a hamstring too, I think, right?
And I think it's a hamstring. I could be wrong, but he's out weeks. He's expected to miss weeks, and that just sucks because Paul George just came back playing terrible. Shout out to Paul George. And then Joel Embiid hasn't returned yet. So they're just, I will say, silver lining, maybe this means they deal with injuries beginning season instead of end of season, but it'll probably end up being both.
Yeah.
It'll probably end up being both. So, yeah, I feel bad for another one. I got him in fantasy, so I have Jaylen Brown and Kawhi in the IR right now.
Man. Jaylen Brown, luckily, is already listed questionable for today's game. That at the time this gets released, today's game against the Bucks, which is good sign that he's nearing a return. This is not scheduled, Tyler, but we are roughly 10 games in. The Cavs pull that game out of their behind and somehow win. They're 11-0 now, but we're 10 games in for basically a lot of these teams. What is your favorite preseason take that you've had so far that you feel like has aged really well so far? And what's the one you're like, yeah, that's just not went well for me?
My number one preseason take for sure is how I was, it wasn't a specific take, but just my overall discussion and feeling about OKC's defense.
Yeah.
I was like, this is a generational defense. This defense is going to be ridiculously hard to score on. Mm-hmm. And the way they've been over aggressive with trapping and helping and then running out these lineups. They ran a lineup the other day of 6'5" players. And the offense couldn't create any advantage. They haven't even played a game with Hartenstein yet, and they're already the best defense of all time. Yeah. So yeah, that would be my one take where I'm super, super confident in. And my other one would be, I kind of talked about this in maybe our last episode where we were doing our preseason power rankings, and I kind of blanked on how high I was on the Cavs last year.
Mm-hmm.
And for some reason, that didn't carry over. Like, I was so high on the Cavs last year, and then the offseason happened, and I think my brain reset, and I forgot who the Cavs were, and the fact that they just dealt with so many injuries in the playoffs.
Yeah.
And then this season, I was like, yeah, I think the 5 best teams in the East and I didn't even mention the Cavs.
Yeah.
That was a complete miss. I don't know what I was thinking. Like, it's not like right now I feel the same way about the Cavs that I did last year, but for some reason there was like a gap there that I had to bridge. So yeah, what about you though? What are your two?
I guess we'll start. For me, it's always easier to remember the stuff I got wrong. And the biggest one is just like me botching the Cavs and the Pacers. And I'm bunting them together because of how so high I was on the Pacers and how so low I thought I was on the Cavs. I just completely botched that. I completely misjudged, I think, the impact that Kenny Atkinson would have. And then in general, this team is healthy. Evan Mobley's taking that leap.
You know what? I think we both overlooked the fact that Garland was going to get back to normal. We kind of just both kind of assumed he just was. Yeah, I don't know what. We just forgot.
He has a normal offseason. He has a normal end to last season after he broke his jaw and couldn't eat real food or whatever. We definitely just overlooked that. And what's so weird about me overlooking the Cavs, I'm not going to say I projected the Evan Mobley breakout, but I would do my preseason power rankings. I gave him the plus arrow sign. It's probably going to happen this year, and just completely disregarded that when it came time to ranking the Cavs and giving them their praise or whatever. And then I guess my best take so far has the thing that's aged the best for me so far. It's kind of my faith, I think, is the right word I'm going to go with here. And the Hornets, the Pistons, and I guess Atlanta. I know they lost tonight, but
yeah, just the East, the middle of the pack Eastern teams.
The middle of the pack East teams, calling out on those teams in particular. And another team that's kind of been a weird situation because of all the injuries they've dealt with. But I don't know why people overthought Memphis. That was one of the bigger talking points we had when we did our preview of the season. Memphis is a consistent 50-win team when they're healthy. Don't overthink them. Ja's now banged up again, but they're 6-4. Jaren
Jackson, by the way, Jaren Jackson had a 39-point game the moment Ja went out.
Yeah. Is Desmond's back healthy, right?
I don't think he played in their last game. I could be wrong. I saw Yuki scored his first career points on a step back 3.
Yep. But everybody's banged up for them, and even then they're deeper this year, but they're still finding ways. Ja's considered week to week with the hip. Marcus Smart's doubtful for today's game with the ankle, and then Desmond Bane's out with an oblique injury right now. But Vince Williams is still hurt. Let this team be.
You know who's in though? You know who's in for the Grizzlies? The Demon.
Oh yeah,
the Demon.
I knew this would have been the time for the shameless Edie plug.
The Demon, Zach Edey, is in, and that's all that matters. They will win 60 games as long as Zach Edey is in the rotation.
Edie for MVP, folks. No, who needs a president? Exactly. Edie for president, 2028. There we go.
After what he did to Valanciunas, I'm all for it.
That was awesome.
But yeah, I think that's going to wrap us up, man. Make sure you follow us both on X, Twitter, whatever you want to call it. My name is @TylerBritton_. His is @Sean_DAVI. Sean Davey. And make sure to follow us on YouTube as well. A lot of people have been asking for Sean's channel, the Sports Headline Show.
Sports
Headline Show?
Yeah, okay. Gonna do a rebrand soon and eventually get back to posting. Been a really chaotic and crappy couple of weeks, but we're gonna get back there soon.
We're all good. And then make sure to subscribe to my YouTube, Hoop Venue. Follow me on Hoop Venue. You can just look up the name Hoop Venue. You'll find something on a platform.
Yeah.
Appreciate all of you guys tuning into this. Make sure to do a 5-star rating on Spotify and subscribe to our YouTube channel, the Hoop Venue Podcast. Like he said, 5-star right there. Basically, just if there's a way to support us, you should just do it. Might as well. But,
I agree.
Yeah, if you listen this far, you're a real one, and we'll catch you guys in episode 8.